Clear that if we're to alleviate inequality for women in Austin, we have to confront our city's current inability to process basic evidence relating to sexual assault. So here's what we know today. We know that in Austin last year, there were nearly 700 sexual assaults reported, and that every day 2 people report being victims of rape or sexually assault in Austin. That's every day. We also know that before the closure, the lab was already having difficulty meeting the needs of sexual assault survivors because it took an average of 12 to 18 months to process evidence. And we know that even if this lab began processing forensic evidence related to sexual assaults today, there would still be 3,000 untested rape kits in the backlog that already existed before this lab was closed. This lab leaves on the table 1,300 cases where forensic evidence needs to be processed in order to move the case forward in any way. So it's astounding to me that we know this much violent crime occurs in our community every day, and it doesn't appear that we are prioritizing this issue in response. And as an individual commissioner, I will be asking the entire Austin Commission for Women that we recommend that the issue of sexual assault be prioritized within city budgets, including the Austin Police Department's budget. Following questions. What resources are needed to build an efficient lab, DNA lab, and what has been allocated thus far? And by efficient, what I mean is, what will it take to move beyond the 1,300 cases that are now on hold as a result of the lab's closure? And how can we do so in a way that really provides a sense of justice and dignity for victims and survivors in our community? Because I know that the Austin Police Department is committed to public safety, and I know that the will is there to work together. We just have to do it. So how can we work together to ensure that we're prioritizing the needs of the nearly 700 victims from last year alone? Because my expectation as a commissioner and also as a mother to 2 young children is that we live in a community where our budget really prioritizes the needs of the most vulnerable. I want our budget to reflect that which we hold most sacred. I know the will is there, we just have to do it. So it's my complete pleasure now to announce Connie Stogner, who is Vice President of Prevention and Community Services at Safe Alliance. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Connie Stogner. I'm with the Safe Alliance. SAFE is Stop Abuse for Everyone, and it's a partnership between Austin Children's Shelter and Safe Place. Thank you so much to the Austin Commission for Women for having me today, and council members for literally shining a spotlight on this issue today. It's just so important. I'm here to represent the voices of thousands of survivors of sexual assault in our community. SAFE is extraordinarily concerned about the closure of the lab. As Anna mentioned, it was already a strained system prior to the closure, taking up to a year to process the kits, and this will only set us back further. It's extraordinarily distressing to me to think that what ultimately happens is that perpetrators stay on the streets longer. I think it's really important to think about the fact, though, that the DNA piece is just one piece of the larger puzzle. You can't prosecute a case if you don't have good investigations, if you don't have strong prosecution, if you don't have victim services support, if you don't have community advocates. All of those pieces are important, and you don't get the rates of prosecution up unless you have all those pieces in place. Only about 9% of all sexual assaults ever get reported. National research suggests that across our country, and I don't know how we would, after experiencing trauma that one experiences after a sexual assault, I understand the reasons why victims might feel they don't want to report this. However, we really need to do a better job. If we ever want to see that number go higher than 9%, we must do a better job for our community in prosecuting these crimes. I support what Anna mentioned, that This needs to be a priority for our community and the city budget. It is absolutely unacceptable. The prosecution rates are low, and we have to do a better job. And it's not this one piece or this one piece or this one piece. There has to be resources to all of those pieces in order for us to do a better job. And I would also just urge anyone out there who might see this, if you're a survivor of sexual assault or have a friend that's experienced sexual assault, please reach out to SAFE. Our hotline number is 512-267-SAFE. So thank you very much, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Tovo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Tovo, and I represent City Council District 9. And I really want to thank those of you gathered here today who are sharing your expertise and your really difficult stories to help shine this light on how, as a community, we can really work together to help prevent sexual assault, and to really make sure, as has been said, that our city budget reflects that high priority. And I'm here today really to illustrate my commitment to making that a high priority. We must allocate adequate resources to making sure that sexual assault evidence is analyzed rapidly and efficiently so that perpetrators can be brought to justice, and so that we can see justice for those who have survived sexual assault and other violent crimes. So as the City Council begins our budget process and analyzing the City Manager's recommended budget in these weeks ahead, you have my commitment to looking carefully at those numbers, to raising those questions that the Austin Women's Commission has that the Commissioner has indicated will be discussed at the Austin Women's Commission, and really making sure that our city is allocating adequate resources to funding the analysis and testing of sexual assault evidence and other DNA samples. We have an absolute responsibility in this community to make sure to survivors of sexual assault and other violent crimes to do everything possible we can to ensure that those responsible for these violent acts are brought to justice as swiftly as possible. So again, thank you for being here today and for the important work that you're doing.
Hi there, my name is Delma Catalina Limones, and I'm here today as a survivor of sexual abuse to demand that we all come together to open up the forensic lab and get it back up to standard so that they can resume services for victims of sexual assault. Coming forward about sexual abuse is a very scary, vulnerable, yet brave thing to do. Many survivors don't come forward about abuse because we still live in a world where believing a survivor is a very radical act. But when a victim is willing and wanting to come forward, they deserve our community's full support. In my personal experience, I thought if I come out and tell people what happened to me, everyone will believe me. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Not everyone believed me. I was a first-generation college student going through the legal process to seek justice with very little support. It was difficult. I felt victim blamed by members of my own family. I was triggered at the thought of being in the same building as my abuser. Despite the difficulty of that dark week in my life, I made it through and justice was served. And I want you all to know that this would not have been possible without an amazing court advocate from my local Women's Crisis Center and the evidence that helped prove me right. Too many times, the only thing that is standing between a survivor of sexual abuse and the justice that they deserve is the evidence to prove to everyone what she knew all along. I cannot imagine my life if I had not spoken out. Winning my case gave me the closure and the strength that I needed to live my life again. I want the City of Austin and APD and the community to help survivors of abuse to get the closure and justice they deserve so that they're getting the resources that they need in an appropriate manner. Thank you. And up next, it's Councilmember Greg Hassan.
Delma, first of all, thank you for sharing your story, and I'd like to thank everyone for getting together today and for raising this issue to the City Council's attention. I think that it's so critical that we process this evidence as swiftly as possible in order to build trust with our community. When our community members feel that our city government is fulfilling our side of the bargain, I do believe that we can raise the reporting rate and the successful prosecution rate of sexual assaults, which are dramatically underreported. If we just take a step back and think about who it is we're talking about serving, victims of sexual assault obviously have been through that already. Then they have gone through the challenge of reporting sexual assault. And then finally, they have gone through the difficult ordeal of providing that evidence through a rape kit, which is not an easy thing to do. And so I'm committed to doing everything that I can to work together with our departments, with community advocates, with survivors themselves, to make sure that the city is doing the best we can to follow up on our side of the bargain. The closure of the lab is a challenge in and of itself. But when the lab was open, we already had concerns, and this has made, the closure has made a challenging situation even worse. The city has received federal grants to reduce our rape kit backlog in the past, and the council did approve a contract with an outside lab last April to get many of those kits tested, and we appreciate those efforts by the police department to work towards reducing our backlog. But now that the lab is closed in response to a state audit that raised serious concerns, things are much more challenging. And so I'm going to be working with my council colleagues and with the Mayor Pro Tem and with the department to think about what the best stopgap solutions can be between now and when the lab gets reopened. The department has said that it's likely to be 6 months after training with DPS that lab can be opened, and so we can't get further behind. We have to do everything that we can to address this, and that may mean dedicating resources here in the upcoming city budget process that we just kicked off yesterday, and it also means getting everybody at the table. And I have heard a real commitment from APD to meet with the advocates and survivors who are here with us today, and to do everything that we can as a community to ensure that when we're thinking about public safety, we really are thinking about public safety for everyone and taking the issue and the crisis of sexual assault as seriously as we should. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our remarks at this time. We are happy to entertain questions, should there be any. We want to thank all of you for being here. Yes.
Gigi Barnett from KXAN, thank you for inviting us. I have a question for Ms. Lamones. Can you tell us more of your story? What happened particularly? You said that the suspect in your case was brought to justice.
Yes, and while my case was not here in Austin, Austin is my community now, and I know that the importance of evidence being used in cases like this, so I very much care about what's going on right now, and the reason that I decided to share my story, even though it didn't happen in this community, was because I know that the difference that evidence can make in a case.
So your case happened how long ago?
About 4 years ago.
So then when you hear this being your community, and God forbid that it would ever happen to you again, but that it could happen to other women who are just like you, and you hear that this crime lab will not be open until 6 months after training, which that's far in the future. Your thoughts, and what do you tell other women like you?
Well, as Councilmember Greg Hazar said, that we should all come together to find a solution between those 6 months so that we don't fall far behind. And what I'm hoping is that everybody here leaves committed to, filling that gap and making sure that when the lab does open in 6 months that it's up to standard.
But it's already can take 12 to 18 months already for anything to be processed, and that lab isn't even open.
Well, I hope that we all come committed to find a solution in between that time.
Can Councilman Kazar answer that question? What do you tell women now? So there's already a 12 to 18 month backlog. Now you have to do the 6 months and then of getting this lab back up to speed, and that's after training. So we're looking at 2 years before cases can effectively be processed. What do you tell women who are like Ms. Lamones, who says, somebody assaulted me just last night?
And APD can probably give you the best details on this part of it.
I'm happy to answer.
Okay, whoever can answer that.
I'll pass it along to her. But I think that we are sending cases to be processed while the lab is closed to DPS, but it's fewer than we could have been doing with our own lab. And as you mentioned, our own lab was doing less than we would like to be doing. And so I think that Connie could probably follow up with you on that, but the issue is we do need to figure out how we can expand service while the lab is closed. We do have some, but we need to expand that. And then once we have the lab up and running, there may be need for more resources and different kinds of triage to make sure we're prioritizing these cases. But really, she has the most direct experience on this, so I'll
Yeah,
pass it
so,
on. And the mics are probably-
yes. So SAFE operates the Forensic Nursing and Advocacy Program, also known as Eloise House. And in that program, we respond to all the sexual assault, pretty much all the sexual assault survivors in our community, both by providing the forensic exam in which the DNA evidence is collected, and we also provide advocacy, which is another important piece which supports the survivor in trying to understand the criminal justice system, understanding what services are out there, and what options she or he may have. I actually have a newly trained advocate here today. And so your question is such an important one. We right now are having to tell survivors when we're talking about this process, and they ask us, how long will this take? Well, before we could say, well, it could take to 12 to up to 12 months, and now we're literally having to say, I don't know. It is horrible. It is horrible to have to say that to a survivor. We already know that survivors have many, many reasons why they don't want to move forward with the criminal justice process. Many, many valid reasons why someone might choose not to. Many of which we just heard about how you're not believed, you feel like you're blamed. There are so many reasons. It's a long process. It disrupts your life unbelievably. And so for us to have to tell a survivor, they're in that moment, I don't know, it's not okay. And it is it's my concern that the rate of women and men who are sexually assaulted, who want to go forward with the criminal justice process, that's going to even go down further from what is already an abysmally low rate, because you can't tell someone, I don't know. We need an answer, and I'm also encouraged that we can come together and with all of the partners and work to find a solution, because I do think that will is there, but it needs to happen, and I can't stress enough how this needs to be a priority issue for city budget. It doesn't work, it's just this piece. We need to have enough resources to build the lab in the appropriate fashion with the best technology to have, we don't just need a lab, we need a good high-tech, enough resources to have a good lab. And we need support in investigations, and we need support in victim services, and we need support in prosecution. All of those things need the priority of the budget for our city and for our community and for survivors. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Any idea, I believe the lab closed on June 10th, any idea of how many women or men have come in for services? I guess this would be for you again, Connie, I'm sorry. Since that time?
Since the lab closed, tell me when?
Yes, so I just spoke with an advocate yesterday who informed me that in June alone, they were sending one case a day to APD DNA lab. And so that's anecdotal information illustrative of 1 month alone,
I
but
would
you
say
can,
even higher than that.
it may be higher, that's a conservative number, and so while we learned on the day the lab closed that left 1,300 cases pending, we know that every day these assaults are being reported and every day evidence is being collected. We need to be able to convey the assurance to survivors that something will be done with that evidence, so that the answer is not just, I don't know.
One more question. So hindsight's 2020. And when we look at this case and folks who are in the city and they're saying, okay, so we had this backlog up to 12 to 18 months, and now this happens, and from what I understand, it was that someone sadly had passed away, and they were kind of the linchpin in all of this. They kept everything going, and when they died, it kind of, the lab pretty much fell apart. So when folks around town are saying, what was the city doing? How come there was no accurate oversight for this lab? How do you respond to that?
Well, I'll let others who represent city government respond, but I can say as an individual, it's my opinion that the success of a forensic DNA lab should not rest on the life or death of one individual. So while there are very valid reasons why APD finds itself in the situation they are today, we need to take this closure time to ensure that when we're open again, these systems are reinforced and this problem does not occur again. I'm sorry for the loss of this individual, but when someone leaves a job for whatever reason, the work must continue.
And Councilman Kassar, wasn't there already money? There were several grants that this lab already had, so throwing more money at the problem may not be the answer. How do you respond to that question?
I don't want to step on your toes. I'll tell you what I'm going to be asking my fellow commissioners to do. I understand that there are budget concerns. I understand that we want to improve safety generally. What I'm going to be asking the commissioners to do is to identify those aspects of the budget. I'm confident APD will have conversations with us because they've already come to the commission to talk to us and to brief us. So I'm confident that door is open. If we need to reallocate money in a way that distributes funds that makes more sense, then we need to do that. It's not okay just to say we can't throw more money at it. It's not okay just to say it didn't work before. We are a progressive city. We are a committed city. I know we can find the answer. I'm confident we can find the answer. If it means reallocation, then that's what it'll be. But as Connie has emphasized, you know, while I was interested in this particular issue because it's the issue before us right now, the reality is it's one system in many systems that needs to be looked at holistically. So what I will be asking the commission to do is to sit down and look at all those holistic parts and see what recommendations we can make to really change something.
I have one more question. I know there was a contract the city council approved to send, send thousands of DNA kits to Utah. Is the lab closing going to affect that contract at all?
So that was part of the reason that the city council entered into that contract. And I think it would be appropriate for the Austin Police Department to really discuss further the questions about the lab's closing and what their next plans are. But again, you have certainly my commitment, and I believe you'll see a lot of discussion during the council budget process about what those next plans are for the Austin Police Department and how the forensic lab hopefully will be expanded to really meet the capacity that it needs to be operating at to make sure that this evidence is processed in a swift manner.
And how much is that grant affecting the cases? Because they're not helping with all the cases, right? The ones that are being sent to Utah.
It's my understanding, based on our discussion, that it's really looking at the backlog of cases to try to, there is, as has been said, a will to see this changed and to see the evidence processed in a more swift manner so that these cases can be resolved more rapidly.
We're gonna have to get out of here.
Okay,
So
great.
probably if there's maybe one more question, then we have to wrap up.
I would just close by saying if there were any other issue that you knew occurred twice every day at least and was reported twice every day to law enforcement, we would be paying attention. Part of the problem is that sexual assault is stigmatized, so I'm really glad we were able to shine a light on this issue and say the word rape and sexual assault out loud. Start a conversation.